In this video we will examine one of the lesser-known interrogation practices recorded in parts of medieval Italy, known as the Iron Hoisting Hook. The discussion will begin with the rise and administrative structure of King Alberto di Morienza, whose reign created the environment in which such methods were developed. We will then explore the construction, procedure, and controlled application of the Iron Hoisting Hook within his judicial system. Guys, can you help me to hit 1,000 subscribers on this channel? And it's my dream. Sorry for interruption, it's humble request. Let's jump into the video. King Alberto di Morienza emerged from a minor noble family in northern Italy during the late 13th century. His early upbringing was shaped by administrative discipline rather than military ambition. He spent his youth studying taxation systems, diplomatic protocols, and urban management instead of battlefield tactics. His father, Count Rinaldo, ensured that Alberto received exposure to municipal councils in major cities. These councils dealt with trade disputes, grain pricing, and merchant regulations. Alberto's attendance allowed him to understand how civic institutions functioned in rapidly growing Italian territories. When a regional succession crisis unfolded after the death of Duke Ferrante, several noble factions pushed for a neutral candidate. Alberto, known for his steady temperament and financial literacy, became the compromise choice. His election was supported by guild leaders who preferred a ruler capable of stabilizing commercial networks. Upon gaining power, Alberto prioritized standardizing revenue collection. He introduced fixed tariffs for cross-regional trade, reducing unpredictable levies that often discouraged merchants. His policies attracted long-distance traders from coastal cities seeking predictable taxation frameworks. He established the Office of Record-Keeping, which organized land ownership documents, inheritance claims, and municipal contracts. This measure reduced internal disputes between noble houses. It also strengthened the central authority, because all legal confirmations required approval from the king's staff. Alberto's administrative approach increased public confidence in the monarchy. Urban populations experienced fewer market disruptions because grain reserves were stored systematically. This system reduced shortages during mild famines and kept bread prices within stable limits. Military matters did not dominate his early reign, yet Alberto maintained a modest standing army for regional security. He recruited soldiers from communities known for disciplined archery and light infantry tactics. These forces were primarily assigned to guard trade routes rather than engage in expansionist campaigns. His foreign policy favored stable relations with neighboring city-states. Instead of territorial conquest, he negotiated trade pacts involving shared road maintenance and reciprocal toll reductions. These agreements strengthened commercial corridors, linking inland markets with coastal ports. The king invested considerable resources into infrastructure. Stone bridges replaced aging wooden structures, improving transportation during harsh winters. Roads were widened to support increased cart traffic generated by regional trade expansion. Alberto also reorganized the currency system by introducing a uniform silver coinage. Mint officials inspected coins for weight accuracy, reducing corruption by money handlers. This uniformity simplified taxation because payments no longer required complicated conversions. His bureaucratic reforms created a more predictable government structure. Local governors submitted quarterly reports detailing tax incomes, crop yields, and civic concerns. The king analyzed these reports to identify regions requiring relief measures or additional oversight. Education received moderate attention during his rule. Alberto encouraged monastic schools to teach basic literacy to children of administrators and merchants. Although not a universal schooling system, it provided a larger pool of clerks capable of handling official documentation. The king understood the importance of managing noble expectations. He granted minor privileges to influential families, such as limited trade exemptions or ceremonial roles. These controlled concessions prevented large-scale feuds that had destabilized the region before his rise. Alberto's court developed a reputation for procedural order. Meetings followed, strict schedules and written petitions were archived systematically. Foreign envoys often remarked that his government functioned with notable consistency for the era. He commissioned surveys of agricultural lands to determine average yields. This information guided adjustments to taxation rates, ensuring that regions affected by poor harvests were not overburdened. The surveys also highlighted areas suitable for irrigation improvements. Alberto encouraged the establishment of communal warehouses in urban centers. These warehouses stored textiles, grain, and imported metals. Their operation under royal supervision limited price manipulation by private hoarders. Trade guilds expanded under his governance because he provided them with clear legal recognition. Guild charters defined apprenticeship terms, product quality standards, and dispute resolution procedures. These measures increased reliability in local production sectors. During the middle years of his reign, population growth created new administrative challenges. Alberto responded by dividing his kingdom into 6 provincial districts. Each district was assigned a royal commissioner responsible for overseeing tax efficiency and legal coordination. He also initiated a census that documented household compositions, occupational categories, and livestock numbers. The census allowed for more accurate economic planning and helped identify communities that required improved market access. Urban planning became another focus of his leadership. City gates were reinforced with better stonework, and public squares were reorganized to accommodate more regulated market activities. These projects reduced congestion and improved the movement of goods. Alberto maintained cordial relationships with religious orders. He acknowledged their influence in public life and granted them permissions to operate hospitals and charity kitchens. In return, several monasteries provided clerks for administrative duties. Despite his administrative priorities, cultural development did not stagnate. Royal patronage supported manuscript copying, architectural projects, and limited musical instruction at court. These activities enhanced the kingdom's cultural identity without overshadowing its economic focus. The king frequently conducted inspections across his territories. These journeys allowed him to observe local issues directly and verify that governors adhered to reporting guidelines. His presence reinforced accountability within regional administrations. One of his most influential policies involved water management. Alberto commissioned the construction of regulated canals for irrigation and transport. These canals improved agricultural productivity in rural areas and facilitated the movement of goods between districts. The stability of his reign attracted merchants from neighboring regions who sought predictable governance. Increased commercial activity generated higher tax revenues, which in turn funded further administrative improvements. This cycle strengthened the structural foundation of the monarchy. Alberto implemented laws aimed at reducing internal feuds among noble families. Disputes over mills, vineyards, and toll rights were redirected to royal courts for arbitration. This measure decreased retaliatory violence and preserved agricultural productivity. He also reformed the justice system by establishing clear sentencing guidelines. These guidelines reduced inconsistent punishments that had previously varied from town to town. Judges received written instructions outlining acceptable penalties for specific offenses. Diplomatic correspondence increased during his reign due to expanding trade ties. Envoys exchanged information about tariffs, shipping rights, and safe passage for merchants. Such coordination contributed to regional stability and reduced the likelihood of border conflicts. The king emphasized fiscal transparency within his treasury. Annual audits evaluated tax collection efficiency and expenditure records. Officials found guilty of mismanagement faced removal from their posts, reinforcing administrative discipline. As the years progressed, Alberto's governance style became increasingly structured. Provincial councils were required to submit proposals for infrastructure developments, which he approved or modified based on economic feasibility. This process ensured coordinated growth rather than haphazard construction. His reign became known for its balance between central authority and local autonomy. Governors retained control over day-to-day civic matters while adhering to royal administrative requirements. This model improved efficiency without provoking widespread resistance. Alberto's policies ultimately produced a well-regulated kingdom distinguished by stable markets, predictable governance, and functional institutions. His administrative achievements defined his legacy and continued to influence regional management long after his earlier reforms had taken effect. The Iron Hoisting Hook became associated with the judicial apparatus of King Alberto's later reign. Its introduction reflected the period's emphasis on extracting reliable information from detained individuals. The device was not a public spectacle but a controlled instrument used within secured chambers. The hook was typically forged from hardened iron with a tapered point designed to pierce tissue efficiently. Blacksmiths crafted it with a curvature suitable for anchoring beneath the ribs or through the upper shoulder area. Its surface was polished to reduce friction during insertion. The apparatus operated in conjunction with a ceiling-mounted pulley system. Ropes made from tightly woven hemp allowed the operator to hoist the prisoner gradually. The pulley ensured a steady lifting motion that prevented sudden jerks, which could cause unintended internal ruptures. Records from later administrative archives indicate that the hook was reserved for individuals accused of economic fraud, treason, or coordinated theft. Lesser offenses were handled through fines or short-term confinement. The device thus served as a tool for high-stakes interrogations rather than routine punishment. The procedure began with a medical assessment conducted by an assigned examiner. Although rudimentary, this assessment determined whether the prisoner's body could withstand the interrogation. The goal was to minimize premature death, which would impede information gathering. Once cleared, the prisoner was positioned upright with their arms restrained to prevent sudden movements. Assistants stabilized the torso, while the operator identified the correct anatomical entry point. Precision mattered because incorrect placement risked damaging organs that would cause fatal bleeding. The hook was inserted using steady pressure rather than forceful thrusting. Insertion beneath the rib cage provided the most secure hold because the bone structure supported the weight without immediate tearing. Placement through the shoulder was used when rib insertion was deemed unsafe. After insertion, the operator attached the rope to the hook's eyelet. The raising process occurred incrementally. Each incremental lift applied increasing tension to the tissue, creating controlled stress without immediate separation. The gradual method allowed interrogators to monitor physiological responses. Interrogators maintained detailed records of responses, including physical reactions, statements, and signs of physiological distress. These records contributed to administrative decisions regarding charges or further questioning. Documentation reinforced the king's emphasis on procedural oversight. The chamber used for this method contained drainage channels to maintain sanitary conditions. Although limited in effectiveness, these channels reduced the spread of bodily fluids across the floor. Cleanliness supported the goal of sustained interrogation rather than rapid incapacitation. Lighting in these chambers was intentionally bright. Operators needed clear visibility to monitor muscle tearing, bleeding rates, and signs of shock. Torches and small oil lamps were arranged along wall mounts to reduce shadows that could impair observation. The personnel chosen to operate the hook underwent practical training. They learned anatomical landmarks, rope handling techniques, and pacing strategies for incremental lifting. Competence reduced the likelihood of fatal mistakes that would interrupt judicial proceedings. Officials evaluated each session through observation windows installed behind wooden lattice structures. These windows allowed supervisors to assess whether procedures were conducted within administrative guidelines. Oversight was a core component of the king's governance style. Interrogators were required to pause lifting when signs of respiratory failure appeared. The purpose of the method was to induce compliance rather than immediate collapse. Controlled suffering created conditions in which detainees often reassessed their willingness to provide relevant information. If the prisoner delivered a verifiable statement, the operator initiated a controlled lowering sequence. Lowering reduced pressure on the tissues, but did not remove the hook immediately. This allowed officials to verify information before discontinuing the session entirely. In cases where detainees withheld information, the session continued with careful monitoring. Prolonged suspension increased the risk of muscle tearing and nerve compression. Operators adjusted the pace to avoid complete tissue rupture, which would end the session prematurely. Medical examiners observed post-session conditions to determine whether the detainee could endure additional rounds. Those who survived the initial application often developed significant internal bruising, partial tearing, and restricted arm mobility. These injuries were documented in royal archives. The structural design of the hook emphasized durability. Iron cores were reheated and quenched multiple times to prevent warping under tension. Craftsmen sometimes engraved simple identification marks on the base, allowing officials to track which hooks were used in specific cases. Pulley ropes required frequent inspection due to wear caused by repeated lifting cycles. Royal storerooms kept replacement ropes in predictable quantities. Treasury records show periodic expenditures for rope maintenance and pulley lubrication, reflecting the administrative nature of the system. The chambers also included basic restraints positioned along the walls. These restraints secured prisoners awaiting interrogation and prevented physical resistance. Their design was simple, relying on iron rings embedded in stone and leather straps for limb immobilization. Written guidelines instructed operators to maintain consistent communication with interrogators. Coordinated actions ensured that questions aligned with lifting increments. This synchronization maximized the likelihood of extracting coherent information rather than disoriented responses. The method carried a high probability of long-term injury. Survivors often experienced chronic pain due to muscle separation and nerve damage. However, from an administrative viewpoint, these consequences were considered secondary to the acquisition of strategic information. Local governors were informed about the device's strict usage criteria. They were permitted to request its application only in cases involving economic destabilization, military conspiracy, or threats to regional infrastructure. This restricted scope ensured hierarchical control over the method. Testimonies from scribes who transcribed interrogation records describe consistent procedural formalities. They noted that the lifting often began after an initial verbal inquiry period. The device served as the escalation step when verbal questioning proved insufficient. The king's emphasis on documentation generated extensive logs. These logs included prisoner names, accusations, hook placement details, duration of suspension, and observable reactions. Although the original documents did not survive in full, later references confirm their existence. Architectural descriptions from later sources indicate that interrogation chambers were positioned below administrative buildings. Their placement ensured privacy and reduced noise leakage into public areas. Access was limited to authorized personnel with written permission. Royal Council members reviewed interrogation outcomes during internal meetings. These reviews determined whether further legal proceedings or additional questioning were required. Decisions followed a structured format consistent with the king's wider administrative practices. The method's efficiency lay in its ability to sustain pressure over extended periods. Physiological stress increased gradually, allowing interrogators to pace sessions according to the prisoner's resilience. Operators used predetermined time intervals to calibrate lifting speed. Some sessions concluded without confessions, yet the device remained part of the judiciary for its perceived deterrent effect. Knowledge of its existence discouraged certain forms of organized economic misconduct and reduced repeated offenses among merchant circles. The king did not publicly endorse the device but allowed its controlled use within the judicial hierarchy. Its covert application aligned with his preference for predictable internal order rather than public displays of punishment. Stability remained the guiding principle. Extra precautions applied to prisoners with signs of infection or weakened bone structures. The examiner could deny clearance when the risk of rapid collapse outweighed potential information gain. Denial records were filed with notes justifying the decision. The iron hoisting hook required maintenance by specialist blacksmiths who inspected the curvature for cracks. Any defect risked sudden breakage during lifting. This maintenance routine ensured uninterrupted functionality within interrogation cycles. The device influenced regional judicial practices because neighboring city-states adopted similar methods in modified forms. Adoption was not universal, yet the structural concept of controlled suspension gained recognition as an interrogation tool in certain areas. Although the device belonged to the category of invasive interrogation tools, its application followed a stable protocol. Each step, from clearance to documentation, reflected the procedural mindset of the king's administration. The iron hoisting hook thus represented a system in which medical assessment, mechanical design, and bureaucratic oversight converged. Through regulated application, the state pursued information regarded as necessary for maintaining political and economic stability. The later years of Alberto's reign showed growing administrative strain. Population growth increased demands on food supply, trade regulation, and regional oversight. These pressures exposed inconsistencies in the kingdom's infrastructure that earlier reforms had temporarily concealed. Governors began reporting delays in tax collection caused by market fluctuations and poor harvests. Several councils requested assistance to stabilize grain prices, revealing imbalances in agricultural production. The central administration struggled to respond with the same efficiency it once demonstrated. At the same time, concerns arose regarding the long-term effects of intrusive interrogation tools. Council members questioned whether reliance on invasive methods created tension between local authorities and merchant communities. These discussions signaled a shift toward evaluating administrative practices more critically. As trade networks expanded, neighboring regions improved their own judicial procedures. They adopted standardized documentation, broader legal representation, and regulated questioning methods. These developments highlighted contrasts with Alberto's older interrogation framework, including the continued use of the Iron Hoisting Hook. The royal treasury also faced increased expenditure due to infrastructure repairs and growing military needs. Financial strain affected the ability to maintain judicial facilities, including chambers where the hook had been employed. Maintenance delays weakened the operational consistency that once defined the system. Administrative councils eventually recommended limiting invasive procedures to avoid undermining economic stability. Their reports emphasized the importance of maintaining strong relations with guilds and merchants who contributed significantly to tax revenue. Economic priorities began outweighing the earlier emphasis on stringent interrogation. Legal advisors drafted proposals encouraging reliance on documented evidence, financial audits, and regulated witness hearings. These proposals reflected broader European trends towards structured legal inquiry. Gradually, the kingdom reduced its dependence on invasive tools in favor of more predictable administrative mechanisms. The Iron Hoisting Hook remained in archives as a reference to an earlier phase of governance. Its decline illustrated the kingdom's transition toward administrative methods aligned with evolving legal standards and economic needs.